that, then you can be clear that that's what it is. And it ain't got nothing to do with all these other things that other folk want to see happen. And we're very, very clear, we write in our proposal, we will not be a gatekeeping organization. There are other organizations you can give your money to who will gatekeep for you. But ECHO will not do it. Now, when they folk get it, they clear. They said, they go to them, they said, look, we've had program officers who call us and say, that's some pretty tough language you got in there. But we say, look, that's true to who we are.
That's right.
That's true to the community we're working in. And we ain't trying to represent them, we're trying to say this is what they're saying. If you want to know what community folks are saying, this is what they're saying. Now, if you don't want to deal with what community folks are saying, then stop writing this stuff up in your annual report. That you say this is what your foundation is about. This is what you want to do. This is how you want to create a justice movement that's going to change the face of the United States. Well, you can't do it this way. You got to give folks some freedom to make a difference. That's real. And that was what our core value was. We were not going to gatekeep for nobody.
All right. Bless you.
Now, we talk about program of work a little bit. This is the stuff that you do to implement the strategies, right? Now, we can't talk in specific detail from a distance about what your program of work really looks like. You have to do that on the ground, and you have to do it every day, because your program of work evolves. Today you say we're going to do these things, some of them get done, some aren't done yet, but new things arise, and it keeps evolving. And we do it in terms of tasks, timelines, and assignments. What needs to get done, when does it need to get done by, and who's going to do it? And if you don't hold yourself accountable in terms of checking about whether your stuff's getting done, of course you may soon find out that nothing got done. Okay, or not the things that you wanted to get done, or not in the way you wanted to get done. But you also don't live in a vacuum. The other side is responding, reacting, adjusting, trying to get around what you're doing, and so forth. So you have to be flexible and adaptable, and your program of work may need to change. Sometimes you have small changes, sometimes large changes. You may set out in January to set a plan out for the year, program of work for the whole year. But as you're evaluating during the year, you may find the things you wanted to do are no longer priorities, and things you didn't anticipate even having to do have become priorities. That's okay. But if you put blinders on and say what this is about is on January 1st, we have a program of work, and you walk your way through it for 12 months without looking to either side, you may have become quite irrelevant by the end of the year in terms of what your goals and objectives are. So this is about very intense scrutiny, which has to be built on a foundation of truth-telling. You've got to be honest with yourselves and with each other about what's working and what's not working, and what adaptations and changes you have to make. So you have to overcome the fear of risk-taking and be willing to fail. Whoa, wait a minute. What's this fail stuff? Fail stuff is about learning. It's all experiments, right? Nowhere is it written how to do this stuff and how it's going to work out. You're like a scientist, and you make experiments. And some work and some don't. Some work better than others, and some don't work very well. Some of the right experiments with the wrong people, right? You didn't mix the right stuff together, right? And some of them just go, and some things really work. So that's a matter of evaluation, self-evaluation, criticism, self-criticism, and so on. So we started out by holding meetings at the county level, as we talked before, one-on-one, small groups, 3 to 5, larger groups, 10, 12, and so forth, to build relationships, understanding, and a commitment to redistricting. And our focus in this process was on an overview of key local issues. The relationship of the lack of power to the perpetuation of the problems people faced. What's the relationship between being powerless and having these problems? Why couldn't we solve this stuff? What does it take to solve this stuff? How the capacity to impact the formation of public policy could make a difference. This is what we talked about. How being able to hold public officials accountable was the key to impacting the formation of public policy, how the electoral process and sustained community organizing was the key to holding public officials accountable, and how redistricting was the key to the electoral process and therefore the key to the redistribution of power, where power is the capacity to make things happen or not to happen. So when, we didn't actually talk like this, and you didn't sit here like this and go say those things quite that way. You're talking in conversation with people. But what you want to do is work through this framework. I knew going in that at some point or another, these were the things that I wanted to come out with in the discussion. And with each individual, you may have to work at that in different ways. Some people, you had to be very slow getting to this discussion because you knew their level of fear, if you talked about this stuff, would be very great. So you had to find some key, some handle in what they were talking about to begin to inquire in ways that began to burrow in from the inside of their way of thinking to come out with this discussion. Like let's say a school superintendent who was complaining about not having resources that he needed to educate the children. Well, what do you think? How do you think we could get those resources? Well, it's too bad, the board won't in its budget make this money available. Well, who is on the board? So and so and so and so. So. Well, what do you think of them? Well, I don't know. I don't know if I should talk about that. Well, it's okay. I'm not going to say anything to them. You close your pad, put it away, right? You remember it, but you didn't write it down. You build the confidence, right? And he says, well, so-and-so, well, how does so-and-so get elected? Well, he's over in that district. So what do you think about you? Is anybody interested in running against it? Oh, yeah, so-and-so. Well, what do you think about that? Well, it'd be good if they could do it, but they don't have any organization over there. So-and-so is just going to get reelected. So now all of a sudden you're into this discussion about who do you know over there that might be it? Now you're getting some names. So this person may not talk about all of this stuff, but they also may be a conduit of information to get at this stuff. And you say, this is a person, maybe I have to come back a second time. This first time it's not completely safe. I don't want to scare them away entirely, so I've covered some of this, but maybe not all of it. Or maybe this is a person I know is not going to touch redistricting with a 10-foot pole. I don't need to get that far. But you get the idea. If you're rooted in where you need to go, if you understand it, you can be flexible and adaptable to the situation. And out of talking to 20, 30, 40, 50 people, you begin to find 2, 3, or 4 that you say are really solid. These are people interested in working. They have the understanding about the relationship among all these things, and they're willing to work. And I think we can take the risk of trusting in this first stage and see. Some of the people work out, some don't. But in the course of your work, if you're doing the process of building where other people can come in, you get a new mix. Some people leave, some people stay, a new mix, and more people stay, and some people leave, and so on. And next thing you know, you're building an organizational process. And this was the core of how we attacked it initially. Now, in your program of work, you need to, of course, obtain the census data and the maps of the counties and state and the precinct maps and electoral districts and so on. This is the stuff, these are the working tools of how you get at the redistricting process, which we're not going to go into today, but it's part of your program of work. And we would provide training on how to do redistricting to meet the test of one person, one vote, and the concept operable then, probably not operable now, create a maximum number of electoral black districts. And as we talked about before, this training was about building relationships and about development of tools and about building a sense of capacity, right? And there's a lot that you could do around this as part of your program of work. And it doesn't have to be just one training. What we envisioned was an ongoing process at every stage, and we tried to do that. We had training getting into the redistricting. We had training after the redistricting was done in anticipation of people qualifying to run for these districts. And after they qualified, we had training around how to run a political campaign. and how to do poll watching and poll working and absentee ballots and stuff. And then we had training around community organizing and training around the specific issues that were of concern to people, like education. Okay? So part of that work plan, or program of work, was to form these temporary county committees, form the statewide coalition, build a relationship with the Legislative Black Caucus and public officials by involving them in the training process with the community and involving them in the work of the county and state committees as co-workers, not bosses. Okay? And that was our initial program of work in a broad sense, not in the detail of who was doing what day to day. There's no way we could break that down for you now, but I probably got something like 10 3-ring binders of the notes through which we process this whole thing. That's where your old to-do list are. And that's.
I just want to mention one other thing that was an extremely empowering process that came out of the whole redistricting process that we did. As a result of the work, and people in the communities and throughout different counties understanding redistricting and how the process works, there are some lazy folks in Mississippi that are in political office. And in some of these counties, which was supposed to have been redistricting, decided that since the folks usually don't know and probably still don't know that we have to do redistricting, and since we don't want to do it and is satisfied with the way districts are, we're not going to redistrict. And they said that. But as a result of people understanding the process, they went to the elected officials and said, when will you start the redistricting process? When will the public hearings be? Because from our knowledge and understanding of how this process works, this county is supposed to go through the redistricting process. That came about as a result, of them understanding how to figure out the deviation thing and all of that we taught in the workshops. And not only saying that you must redistrict, but these are the number of districts that we are entitled to. So it forced some of the counties who had decided that we're going to just let this thing blow over, nobody say nothing about it, and we don't have to go through that process. But they went to them and forced them to get up off of their sit down, do nothing, and go through and redistrict the counties.
Good.
Can you talk a little bit about the, I know we talked in much detail on the state level, but what was the impact on the local levels in terms of the, when redistricting happened on the county and the municipal level? What was some of the...
Well, actually what happened at the county and municipal level in terms of redistricting was that Mississippi had fallen behind Louisiana in terms of the highest number of black elected officials in the country. But after the Alabama, and what happened was that because of the redistricting that was done at the local level, at the county level, and at the city level, there were more blacks who were elected to the county offices, and also in terms of county board supervisors and also city elections. So actually, there was like a 18% jump in local officials being elected to public office.
But also,
The situation was so scary to the white folks because the percentage of board of supervisors jumped 30% black, that they immediately moved to pass a constitutional amendment to reduce the number of supervisors in each county from 5 to 3, which would force a redistricting and which would make it more difficult to create electable black districts by making the districts larger. That was defeated. That was defeated because the consciousness of the community statewide had been raised to such a level by including the community in this whole process that people knew and understood immediately what we were talking about when we put out the word, that this was designed to undermine the success that had been achieved through the redistricting. We didn't have to do a lot of explaining about what it all meant. That's why the process is empowering. If you include people in it from the beginning and enable people to learn what it's all about, because then as the white folks make their adjustments and try to end run these results, the community is in a position to understand and follow the game as it's being played, not by reading about it 5 years afterwards in terms of how they got screwed. Okay?
And also another extremely, important element to the whole redistricting thing was the whole thing of judiciary districts that was drawn, where the judges
Became black for the first time.
became black. And they made extremely important decisions. So the increase in the number of black districts where we could elect black judges, also was extremely important.
But the key thing to me is not the elected officials. The key thing to me is the building of organization at the local level, which then carried on the work not only of electing people and holding them accountable, but of beginning to develop work around their real agendas, the issue which really concerned them, which they couldn't do unless they were able to address these problems at the level.
No, not you,
Which they couldn't do unless they could address them at the board level and at the legislative level, and by involving a sufficient, core of the community to come forward and demonstrate their commitment on these issues. And they couldn't have done all of that without having developed an understanding of how the political process works and what their relationship to it is. And I don't know what the situation is in South Carolina, but I know when we started out, and we still have the problem today, how little knowledge and information, how little understanding people actually have of how the political process works. But we've also discovered in the course of doing our education work how systematically these schools have cleansed from their curriculums in the elementary, middle, and high school, as well as college, any basis for the black community to learn effectively about how the political process works. It's just extraordinary to me that in high school, the entire in the Delta, Mississippi, the entire discussion of the formation of the United States Constitution and the Declaration of Independence and all of the events surrounding it are begun and completed, including all of the graphics, on a total of 2 pages in the entire book. Now, the Civil War battles, whoa, pages and pages of that, battle by battle. But to learn about the Bill of Rights, there's barely a passing reference to the Bill of Rights. So how are you going to know about what the First Amendment means, or the Fourth Amendment, or the Fifth Amendment, or the 14th Amendment, or the Sixth Amendment, all of which are about those things which guarantee people's rights and their participation in the political process. Or the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments as wartime amendments, supposedly undoing racism, it's there in 2 pages. It's gone.
And very few people understand, how a bill becomes law.
Right.
Go through that process. So how can you honestly and truthfully talk about the impact of public policy without knowing that process? And one of the most interesting things that was revealed to us early in the redistricting process showed us how little the legislators knew about the redistricting process. Because when they found out that we were gearing up to have a lot of community people involved in the process, they attempted in their first meeting to have a meeting to show that they were going to be inclusive with all of the state legislators participating in the redistricting process. And we went in this meeting and they had decided that they were going to have all of the state legislators to draw a redistricting plan collectively. And the way they were going to do that was that they had all of the people that was from each congressional district to come together and draw the maps for their congressional district. And then they were going to put all 5 congressional districts together, and that was going to be the. And when they realized how much confusion they had, then they just had to abandon that whole process and say, look, get out of the way. We're going to do this thing if we can, the way we normally do it. But it was interesting because most of the state legislators had no idea as to how and what the whole redistricting process was about.
John, you have a question?
Yeah, on the question of local elected officials, and y'all mentioned judges, we don't elect our judges here, but the one area, local area, where there is an opportunity for significant expansion is the election of solicitors, who are the equivalent of state attorneys, and who have tremendous power in our court system because they set the docket in criminal cases and decide, you know, can call you up and tell you you're being tried tomorrow morning, be here. And those folks are elected out of districts that don't come close to one person, one vote.
Right.
And it scares the living hell out of white folks thinking about that system being challenged with a voting rights suit.
They were totally crazed about the idea of judicial elections being a part of the work.
Yeah.
They were like, and even our great attorney who we had, who was the plaintiff's attorney, he got caught up in that because he was like, God, these folks are killing me around this whole idea. And we got some great districts, we got some great black folks who got elected out of those districts, and still today we got people who, they made some deals and they let some white folks stay in them offices and told them they had to retire because black folks gonna run for them this time around. And so we got a number of districts that are coming up for election this term in November where the white incumbent has stepped down because he knew the handwriting on the wall, he was gone. And so rather than get beat by a black candidate, he stepped down, and now you got the black candidates going into those districts. But now it was holy hell in terms of folk opening up that process and saying, we can't have black folk in the judiciary. Because I mean, in my district, where I live at, we had the youngest black circuit judge, woman black circuit judge in the history of this country, who ended up being a circuit judge. And she was a friend. She come out of work. We had to whoop her up sometime as an attorney because she didn't want to do right sometimes. So we had to whoop her. But that whooping learned her some lessons. And so now she's been one of the best judges ever. She had told white folks, look, she write order from a bench saying, white folks, y'all gotta give up this information. I'm sorry. You ain't gotta go through this whole big old rigmarole. And she said, now if you don't want to do it, I'll have you put in jail. I'll write the same order to the sheriff, and I bet you the sheriff pick you up. And you're going to be surprised how quick that information jumps out when they got to go to jail. And it's happened. The E91 operator said he wasn't going to get information to the local election commissioner because all of them were black. They didn't need that information. She wrote an order, said give it to them. And if you don't give it to them within 48 hours, I want the sheriff to go over there and pick you up, and I want you to put it in jail. And if sheriff, you don't pick him up and put him in jail, and put you in jail. Write an order for you to go to jail. She wrote that order. 24 hours later, he had all that information on the desk for him. But now they have been trying to get it for 6 months. But because they had a black judge, they went to her and said, look, we can't do our work without it. She said, don't worry about it. She wrote the order, and it happened. Overnight, basically, what it did, 24 hours it was produced. So those are, some of those things are iron doors that been welded shut, y'all. They ain't just rusted over. They got torched, got an arch iron, and they went down there, and then they said, oh, this ain't enough enforcement. Let me put some more welding rods around it, put some steel, cross the bars, and they crossed it, and they said, oh Lord, now it's a cross, let me make some more bars, and they put some more stretches in, and when they got through, it was impenetrable. And when you go to working at that, like this illicit general thing you're talking about, when you open that up, understand it's going to be a serious fight, because once you do, folk will realize that they can't control the law the way they used to control the law. And the law in the South has been a wicked instrument.
You better believe it.
It's been a wicked instrument. It's been something that has raised communities under the law. It's legal to do, and they do it. And we got to stop it. And we can stop it if we begin to do this process in the right type of way.
Yeah, when you mentioned about schools, it just made crystal clear the process in South Carolina. If you don't know what's been happening in South Carolina, there's been a carefully worked out plan to make sure that people don't learn to think in South Carolina. Starting from when they were teaching values back in the 70s and 80s, they came up with a law against that. Some of you mentioned that, remember there was even violent actions against the teaching of values because it meant teaching thinking skills. And so the schools have been carefully constructed so that the young people did not know the process, did not entertain an idea that they could even affect change in the process. So going through the school systems, you were not expected to understand that. So when you became a citizen, the only thing you understood was that you could vote, but it wasn't that important because your vote didn't really matter. And the plantation mentality that still exists today was meant that there were leaders, gatekeepers, the plantation bosses of different color and heritage, that they told you what to do, how to vote, and when it came time for voting, certain people were placed at elections, and they monitored very carefully who voted, and you were threatened if they thought you voted otherwise. And so the culture in South Carolina definitely mandates that you don't know. Even this week, a college student who's a political science major told me that he was dropping political science because he was told what to read and only write on the thoughts of those particular people, not analyze those thoughts or not analyze, synthesize, and come up with new thought. And he realized this, and this is a child from South Carolina. I was amazed that he even came up with that observation. But he said, I'm transferring to North Carolina because they're not teaching me how to think. And that's why I'm taking this course. So it's still in effect. And to approach this topic like redistricting requires several tiers below that to begin that work of undoing history of careful control of thought.
So you really touched on the bottom line, which is what this work is about, really, in its essence, is undoing that history by getting people involved in work which in its nature requires them to do the critical thinking, to learn how to do that critical thinking, and to learn how to do work which brings that critical thinking to life. And the skills that are developed in this process are transferable to any other kind of work. And once you open that door to critical thinking and to work, there ain't nothing that can stop it. Especially as a community. You can see each other as part of the same struggle, and you can continually broaden your concept of community so you don't get trapped in the narrowest of boxes. And you open up that box statewide, you open up that box southwide, you open up that box nationwide.
I always say that in schools, I see it as children are being taught what to think instead of how to think. And that within itself is a defeating process. Also, I like to say this, is that organizations like yours and everyone in here, we got a job to do of deprogramming people. Until we can do that, we can't expect for people to do any better. They don't know no better.
That's right.
So, I mean, they're being taught in the school, like I said, what to think. Somebody got to debrief them somewhere.
But that's part of what we've
Program
been,
that
I mean, one of the things that we recognize as you go through this process, you gotta learn some things, and you recognize those things. Part of our training now is we are teaching the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and the amendments, all of them. Because we recognize that folk don't know them. How you gonna operate out of them if you don't know them? So how you gonna say to folk, I got a right to freedom of speech? How you gonna say to folk, you can't just come into school and grab me and go through all my stuff? You know, you can't do unreasonable searches and seizures because it's part of the Bill of Rights. You know, it's part of part of the Constitution. You can't do that.
But they got to roll
But
the
they
school
don't.
laws.
But it ain't in. But see, my thing is that school law can't
Right,
proceed
right.
over that. And see, but you got to understand that. And if you don't understand that, you are doomed to go down the trail that's gonna always keep you in control. You're gonna always be in control. They're gonna control you. Not that you're gonna be in control of what you're gonna be controlled. See, and they're very clear about controlling you in terms of how you think. Because if you think it, you do it.
Right.
And if it's not there, then you're not gonna do it. And that's just the reality of it. They took in Mississippi, they took SGA, Student Government Association, out of every school. Because they didn't want folks to know how government worked. Even to think about politicizing how and what things went on at the school. They didn't want students to have no idea, no stuff about it. Now we're reconstituting that from a community perspective and saying you're gonna have SGAs in the school, whether you like it or not. Now they don't like that, but the way it's set up and having the power to reorganize communities, they're gonna have it. Having the first one they had in my school now in 20 years.
You got two things.
Two things, then we got two questions.
You got those who are out of school. You need to develop a process through which people can develop information and understanding. You got the kids who are in school. This process ultimately addresses that in this way. You aren't going to be able long-term to succeed if we can't break open what's going on in the school. You've got to be able to get inside the formation of education policy at the elementary, secondary, and college level. You can't do that unless you break open the political process through which the formation of education policy is controlled. And it's different in each state, but in Mississippi, for example, that's a combination of what goes on at the state legislature, state board of education, and the local school districts. And so we have to develop a process in which the community gets access to and can have an impact upon each of those institutions which has a piece of the action. Okay. That's a long-term process. But this education fight has been going on for 200 or 300 years, right? And initially they didn't want, it was against the law for blacks to get any education at all during slavery. And then the limitations were set by law during segregation. And now they're setting them by recreating the separate and unequal school systems that are still segregated. So that all of that work flows out of building a political process through which you can impact the formation of public policy.
Brother Thompson and Carol.
I want to elaborate on what Gerard said about people doing the constitutional rights, because in Darlington County, once the predominantly white school became predominantly black, we created a magnet school. It is then when the mass circus started in Darlington County, and it happened for like 5 years. It only stopped when we took kids out of the school into the community and educated them about their rights, about mass circus and that police officers couldn't bring dogs into the school, have them line up in the hallways, search, and have the dogs sniff them. They did this. They only stopped when we educated those students about what their rights were, and those kids were quick to say, do you have a search warrant? Call my parents. I would be the Fifth Amendment. That is when it stopped, not because I did it, but by giving the kids the tools to do it themselves. And I also found out that even parents, as you said, did not know. That's right.
I can't teach my child about it if I had never known about it.
Right.
And part of it, you got generation after generation now, 2, 3 generations, who have no idea about how this country was founded, don't know that this was a country coming out of revolution. Don't know that this was a country that fought us, you know, that fought a civil war, and then why the Civil War was fought, what it was about. They have some lies about what it was about.
Right.
But they don't have no idea about what it really was about. And you can't think anything besides what they give you in terms of what the Battle of Bull Run was about. You know, the Battle of Gettysburg, and the Battle of Vicksburg, and all them things. And how these wonderful folks in them gray uniforms were such a wonderful folk, and they did all these things for us, you know, and they was trying to protect us, and them stupid other folk, you know, that, you know, they didn't know, and they just, outsiders came down here and just try to force their will on us wonderful people. And so you read that, and you know, them carpetbaggers, them outsiders, them folk, you know, they ain't no good. And that's how we get this schizophrenia. A real schizophrenia around who we are and what we're supposed to be doing. You know? It really is. It's tough. We need to go to the next stage. You want to?
That, I hope, is done on a mass scale, because when you do it with your own children, if they're not really prepared, they can meet the most dramatic opposition. Because I felt that would have to have experienced that with my own children in teaching them those things. So make sure that those children know that you're there for the best, and we try and teach all of that community those same things that Sister Bishop has mentioned. Because to just teach 1 or 2, the opposition is so great without you being known for a long time to speak out about it. They meet some trauma situations that will probably cause them just to turn away from trying to do the right thing.
We had some young people, I'm going to tell this story. We had some young people, because they've been engaged in this process, we were talking about really doing some more of this work. They were willing to give up football.
Mm-hmm.
And so folks said that our young people ain't serious.
Yeah.
But now we had some young folk, one who was 12th grade, who had been, you know, playing football since he was 8th grade, and was a star player and looking to try to get a scholarship to go to college off his football skills, saying, I will quit football my senior year to make sure I learn this. And so what we had to do to say, don't quit football, we got to make this available to you when you can get it.
That's right.
Yeah.
We got to make sure that you get this. If you don't give up, and there was a group of them, a group of young folk in there, giving up band, giving up football, because they said, we can't get this in school. We need this. I'm tired of folk doing this type of stuff to me. I'm just sick and tired of it. And they said, look, this is helping me. I can help my brother and my sister understand this. And so as we understand this, we're going to make some other things happen. And they were right about it, and they're doing it. And they're still playing football, getting beat some, but they're still playing football. and at the same time, changing their school.
This also ties right into the whole thing of empowerment and accountability, because it lets us know that we have to move to the point where we begin to control our schools. And if we are running and controlling our schools, then we can see that these kinds of things are taught in those institutions. So we just need to make sure that this aspect is not left out of our broad vision in terms of where we are and where we need to go as we develop our strategy and program of work.
And don't shun that white boy or girl that want to come and know about it.
Right.
Because that is very detrimental. And I found that to be the case at home. By them knowing that I'm daddy, everybody that has been a resentful manner, but they know if they ease around and they get to where I do this, they're welcome. Or if they come there, they're welcome. So let us make it so that those young people, period, because you'd be surprised to that one or two how much of influence they have on the other. So when that group go to come in, teach them all the same thing. And that gives you a greater power from inside that home.
I know you're all tired, and you've done a wonderful job of hanging in, but we're not quite finished. Okay? We need to take a few minutes. We were supposed to be, what, 3:15 or so? So put your 3:15 hat on still. We want to take a few minutes and talk about we can.
Can't hear you.
I know it. I hear it. Somebody was listening.
While Leroy and Mike is doing that, I think there's one introduction that has been missed. And Al, I want you to focus the camera towards me, and I want you to walk down here so you can get in it. The picture where to capture you. This is Al White, who is our videographer. He's not just a good videographer, but he is a brother that is active in Mississippi. He is a part of a strong, active community organization there that is doing good work. And as a result of him doing good work, he has also offered himself up to be a community service person. And he has qualified to run for the school board in his area. And because of him being well known and his capability and what he stands for, didn't anybody else qualify to run against him. So in essence, you're looking at one that will be on the school board in his community, Montgomery County. So I just wanted you to meet Al and let you know that even though he is a good videographer, he's not just a videographer.
This is your product.
Yeah, this is out of the work. Come out of the work.
Absolutely.
And he put himself up for a candidate coming out of the work. And that makes a difference. I think that what we need to do is to help our folk understand that when you come out of this work, you qualify. You overqualified for them stupid jobs most of the time. And we need folk who come out of work and understand it to get there. Because it's oftentimes much more difficult to train folk who ain't never seen the type of work to understand. And understand why folk are there, trying to hold them to what they said they were going to do. But when folk come out of this work, they're often open to listening, to understanding, and working with community in a very different and unique way.
In our home tries the same thing too. The young lady's running for it. She's organizing. Nobody don't run against her because she automatically get it. It's the same thing.
That's right.
It's a product of work.
I just wanted to give Al a better introduction than him just being the man behind the camera.
I want to know what Mike and I was talking about in the first meeting was about whether or not you needed a 5-minute break just to, to stand up and, move around, lift just a little bit. Because I saw some, stuff, and when you see some stuff, you need to act on what you see. And I saw some folk doing some things, and and they all wasn't pregnant, and they were doing them. And I, so hey, maybe I better give folk a break here. So what we're going to do is to take a 5-minute break. Actually, 150. Come back at 150.
When to get out of your
150. Young person at this workshop.
Southern Echo has done a wonderful job of laying out in a very clear way for South Carolinians how the redistricting process worked in Mississippi during the 90s compared to how it worked in South Carolina, and what tremendous opportunities we in South Carolina have to make similar progress.
Your presentation, what was it designed to do?
My presentation was designed to give the history of redistricting in South Carolina, a history in which we made very large advances in the number of African American legislators in the House, the Senate, and Congress, but which did not have the underlying community organizing base that is so critical to accountability and to continuing to expand the number of accountable black elected officials in South Carolina.
Year 2000 is coming up, another census will be done. How did you see it being? What would you do different this time around?
Well, the last time around, the community organizing base was not laid. So I think the critical difference this time is to begin today laying that community organizing base across the state of South Carolina.
How do you proceed to do that?
Well, the South Carolina Policy Organizing Project, which is made up of South Carolina Fair Share, the Carolina Alliance for Fair Employment, South Carolina Environmental Watch, and South Carolina United Action, has been formed with redistricting as one of the principal areas of work to build that base to affect public policy over the long term in South Carolina.
Anything you care to add that maybe I'm not asking in my direction?
No, that's all.
Okay. Let me get your name and title again for the camera.
My name is John Roof. I'm the Research Director of South Carolina Fair Share.
Okay, let me get your name,
Corey Stevenson,
your title, organization.
lead organizer, South Carolina United Action.
Okay. And tell me a little bit about your impression of this workshop.
The workshop is very intense in terms of Southern Echo has set out and did a very good model which talks about some of the principles, things that should be in place for us to do it here in South Carolina. And I think that's good, and to be able to use some of those principles and that they have been documented in such a way that talks about people and their culture, and how that same culture and that same spirit is right here in South Carolina. I think they've done some truth telling about that level of expectations. Yeah, what we can look at as a model. Yeah.
So, in coming into this training, does it meet up to your expectation, or did it meet up to your expectation in terms of the work?
Yes, I mean, I think at first I had some, you're jittery about crossing over lines, and I think we've done that well in terms of saying it doesn't matter whether it's Mississippi or whether it's Alabama and right here in South Carolina, that we're still dealing with the same enemy. We're still dealing with the same controller, and for us to have pulled this together and be very effectively has set a tone for us to be able to do it here in South Carolina, and to know that we're dealing with the same enemy, the same culture, the same spirit. It just really leads to greatness. Yeah, really leads to greatness.
So what are your plans when you leave? How do you plan to go back in?
I think as a result of this, it's about going back and really setting up the systems to be able to take on this project. Because one of the things is we're looking at the census that's going to be taken. We look at the job that needed to that's there, and we need somebody to take on that position to be able to carry out this plan. I think going back home, really setting up a system that what it's going to take to make this project work, going back and implementing that, and reading through that material and beginning to implement some of those plans. Yes, and getting folks ready to take on the work, because we talk in detail that if it ain't about work, then it ain't. That's not where it's at. It's not in meetings. It's in the work.
What one particular thing in this workshop that stands out for you that impressed you the most?
I think when you look at from the presenters who has present this, and you look at it from the participants who are taking place in this, I see a level of engaging across county line. I see a level of engaging around, yes, we're suffering from the same enemy, we're suffering from the same problem. How do we begin to put a minute on this and begin to control this thing? And I think the love for it and the desire to go after and really come down with some solution, not only talk about the problem, but we are talking about, here's some accurate, some solution, a plan, agenda that could be taken, and if we implement it, nothing but success. So it doesn't so much as talk about the problem. Now we're talking about the solution, and that is dynamic. We're not talking about the wrong, the this and the that. We're talking about how do we fix that wrong, and that has stood out, and that we're working from participatory, from facilitating. It's not like no control. It's just, where do we go? Conversation. It's about growth, and everybody's learning at the process, learning the process. That's great. Yeah.
Good. Are we ready?
Yeah, we're ready. If you like money, like you do music, well, you better listen. Because what I have here is a form. Funny how it can turn into money. But if used correctly, it can get you some dollars. It's got lines. And if you drove here a while, it can get some money. But what we want you to do is, one of the things that we decided that we would do is reimburse you for travel. For those who want, that's the other option. Yeah. So, well, what we want you to do is take this sheet that you drove here and fill it out. And I think on the back of it, we want you to put your name and address on the back of it and sign it. And this is only for travel.
That's Riverside.
River Drive.
That's the one I need to go.
And that's 25 cents per mile.
River Drive.
And like I said, it do turn into money. Green money. That changed. What I do?
I think Greystone.
Greystone.
Going in.
There'll be a little bridge thing.
So, our question is, where we go from here. Now, this is 1998, September. There are some real benchmarks ahead of us, historical. which I think sometime from now, people will look back upon and write about in terms of its significance. And we don't know what it will be, because it hasn't happened yet. And we can have an effect on what that history will be. In 2000, we're going to have a bitterly contested census. Okay. This is, as much as ever, as it's ever been, this one is for the moment. Okay? What I mean by that is that there's a real fight over how to count and who to count. Or I should say, the fight is over how to count because the real fight is about who to count. And we know that there's going to be a strong effort to minimize the populations of the black community and the Hispanic community, especially those two. White folks are really scared of our becoming a majority, not white, I should say not European, population. And the definition of where the population is and how much of it is going to have a tremendous impact on the perception of where programs are needed and how they should be funded and so on, in lots of different ways. But it's also going to determine how districts are drawn in terms of defining the relationship between these communities in terms of who's going to get the best chance to elect people. Okay? And on top of that, there's this Republican-Democratic fight, too, which is also involved in it, and which is integrally mixed up with this notion of whether you see your party as a white party or you see a party as rooted in communities that are not white, because there's that dilemma in it as well. Now, the census data is the census information is the foundation piece or the working tools of the redistricting process. And if you want to understand where people really are, in order to draw good districts, you need as good census data as possible. And everywhere in the country, this is going to be a core problem and a crisis around which we're going to need to work. And it's certainly going to be true in South Carolina, as well as in Mississippi. Now, after the census comes the redistricting. The census is in 2000. The data will be available sometime around the beginning of 2001. And then we go into redistricting process. And each state may have a different timetable before its next elections. But following the redistricting process comes your elections, which begin to utilize the political districts that have been redistricted. Okay? After the elections comes the problem of holding public officials accountable to the needs and interests of the community. So we're now all the way out to 2002, 2003. So we're talking about the next 5 years. Whoa, long time. Whoa, you'll see how fast it goes. When you get involved and say, can I have a few more months? Can I go to the bank somewhere where they got some months stored up? Because I need some. But look, when we got started in 1990, we were 4 months ahead of the census data. Okay, you're starting out a couple of years ahead of that. You got a really terrific jump on it if you do this right. But why is this so significant? In 1965, when the United States Congress passed the Voting Rights Act, it was not the first Voting Rights Act, but it was the first Voting Rights Act with some real enforcement powers. Now, as a result of that, the systematic exclusion of blacks from the voting process in the Deep South was broken open. Okay? In 1980, it was 81, I can't remember. It was Bolton versus Mobile. The United States Supreme Court tried to gut the Voting Rights Act. and said that you didn't have to look at the effect of the districts, you had to look at the intent of the people who drew them. And the United States Congress came right back and amended the law to make it clear that it was not only intent, but it was effect, in order to make it possible to prove violations of the law. So the Supreme Court told you then where it was going, all right? In the last few years, in cases all over the South, the United States Supreme Court has turned the whole situation on its head in this way. The Voting Rights Act is what we call ordinary legislation. It's a law passed by Congress. Supreme Court interpreted it, tried to change the law. Congress came back and changed the law and said, essentially overruled the Supreme Court. So the United States Supreme Court did the clever thing. They said, we're going to one-up Congress. We're going to make our decision based on the Constitution of the United States. And then the Congress can't do anything about it unless they amend the Constitution. And then they did something that is not only truly extraordinary, it's absolutely outrageous. For the first time in history, they provided standing to white folks to use the 14th Amendment and the Equal Protection Clause to protect whites against the efforts of blacks to redress the historic racial discrimination.
Bunch of Ku Klux.
It's obscene, but we need to understand. We cannot get so angry that we lose the capacity to think critically about where we are, because it's exactly what they want us to do. They want us to go back into the mode of anger and reaction rather than to hunker down and to think critically about how we move on from here. Okay? This is going to be the first redistricting after the series of cases in which the United States Supreme Court tried to suck the lifeblood out of the Voting Rights Act. They specifically denounced the concept of creating the maximum number of electable black districts, outraged by that notion, okay? And Mississippi is where that came from. Mississippi is the only state that we know of that has not been sued in this whole process. It's also the only state we know of that had a massive participation from the community in the redistricting process, which is why I think we've never been sued on a congressional or a legislative or a local districts. And considering that everyone around us has gotten sued on one side down the other, you got to ask you know, what's the difference? I mean, this is Mississippi, right? Okay. Now, we are going to need to do several things in our own states and together. Okay? And we need to collaborate and work together to share resources and information, techniques, strategies, and so forth. First, we're going to have to dig in on the census and make sure that we create a process to generate a fair census in each of our states, which means working at the community level to make sure that people come to understand the importance of the census and that we need to cooperate with the census, because if we go back into the I'm going to hide mode, then the black community and the Hispanic community disappear, and we're going to lose out in this transition period. The census data is going to be key to that. But at the same time that we're doing that, this is not in sequence now, but at the same time, we're going to have to unfold a conversation here in the Deep South and nationally to analyze and formulate how we characterize our strategic position around the redistricting that's going to build on the census. We've got to understand the strengths and weaknesses of our position. This is not going to be easy, but we're going to have to be bold. And it may mean even our taking the position that the position of the United States Supreme Court is unacceptable, and it's war. Whatever that means, I don't know what that means yet. Because we have to understand where people's thinking are at, who have some technical knowledge and some legal knowledge about this, and formulate a position that we think people can understand and work with. But it is not, in the early 60s, our position was that the Supreme Court was very clear about what we had the right to do and didn't have the right to do, but they were wrong. Even if they were the highest law of the land, they were wrong. They have corrupted the 14th Amendment. Rehnquist, who's the Chief Justice, has been dedicated to doing that since before he got on the court. He's just not had a majority up to now that was willing to go along with that. And Clarence Thomas, God help us, is the key to having enabled that majority to be completed. And Thurgood Marshall told us to focus on getting the best possible justice, not on the color of the justice's skin, because he knew what was coming down from a Republican administration.
That's right.
And he knew that they were going to appoint a gatekeeper. And he warned everybody. And so these big famous organizations went out there with their head tucked under their arm rather than keeping it back up on their shoulder. And that's why we got to be careful. We got to be thoughtful here. But we have the right to do this. We don't need anyone's permission to do this. And we have the right to come up with any analysis that we think is suitable and appropriate under the circumstances. And I'm not suggesting for a minute that I know what that is. Okay? But it's part of our work. We need to be alert to it because we're going to want you to participate in this discussion as it unfolds at the same time that we're doing the work on the census. So there are multiple tracks. And the third thing is that from the beginning, the work that we do is laying the foundation for what comes next. So that's why the vision is so important. Where do you want to wind up in 2003, 5 years from now? And I would suggest we want to wind up in a position where we have sufficient accountable leadership and organization at the grassroots level, knitted together like 1,000 spider webs, right? Able to hold our governmental officials accountable at every level of government, federal, state, county, and local, so that we can impact the formation of public policy to meet the needs and interests of the community, right? If that's a valid goal, then we need to see the work as we build this process in getting involved in the census, in getting involved in the redistricting, right? That it's laying the foundation step by step so that we wind up at the end of this process in a wholly different place than we're starting out. This is about growth and development. It's about building the sense of community. It's about intensifying our process of building relationships. And you know what? The toughest thing of all, it's about putting aside self-interest and our turf and holding ourselves accountable and holding each other accountable, setting aside ego and setting aside all of our historic differences, whether I like you or not, whether you like me or not. We've got work to do. And this is not just for us. We've got to see this as part of the historical process that lays the foundation for generations to come. I don't have for a minute to believe that all that needs to happen is going to happen in my lifetime. And it would be presumptuous and arrogant to expect that I had a right for it to happen in my lifetime, that I got a right to see it. But I know that I got a job to do. I got my job to do. You have your job to do to enable that to happen, which is why you got to bring the young people in from the jump so they can carry that work on. Otherwise, you set yourself up for failure because when you go, then the work goes. That's unthinkable. That's really what happened in the Civil Rights Movement. A whole generation of work kind of fell between the cracks when you had this mobilization mentality rather than this organizing mentality. And so when the work stopped, the people decided they were going to stop, they went home. Right? And the thing lay fallow. But the seeds were under the ground. Right? And the seeds have come up.
But at the end, we kept you, you've been wonderful. I want to ask this question. For those of us who understand a little Spanish, I asked Mike, Now ask somebody else. What is Viva?
Life.
Viva. Huh?
Life, live.
Life, live. Well, this is what we're saying is our Viva. This is about life. And that life for us in struggling communities is about vision, integrity, values, and accountability. Let's have Viva. Let's have life. Let's have it more abundantly. But you can't have it that way unless we have some vision to keep the people from perishing. Got to have some integrity. Folks that can't trust you. Can't be holding, you can't be watching my back.
That's
If
right.
I see your back running down the road,
That's right.
away from me.
That's right.
You
That's
can't
right.
watch my back like
Now,
that.
see, that's the kind of stuff I like.
You know, you can't do that. You can't do that. So you got to have some integrity in this process. Can't happen without some of this.
Sure, that's right.
Can't have Viva. Can't have life. Can't have it more abundantly
That's right.
unless we got some integrity.
That's right.
And to have some integrity, you got to have some values.
That's right. That's right.
You got to have some things you got to live by.
That's right. That's right.
Because if you don't live by them, you die.
That's right.
I know a lot of folk walking around here valueless and dead.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Got some moving legs, but just as dead as they want to be.
That's right.
And they said they were DOA. They were dead on arrival.
That's right.
And we got to have accountability.
Right.
We got to be accountable to each other. We got to hold each other in check.
Right.
Because the best of us would do the wrong thing.
That's right.
And the worst of us would do, some right things.
That's right.
But it's all about how we keep each other accountable. So I say to you, let's have life. Let's have Viva. Thank you for the day.
Yeah. Oh. I see you. Gonna pump it up. Let me see it.
All right.
Okay.
My name is Olita Myers, and I'm youth program coordinator for South Carolina Environmental Watch.
All right. And how long have you been doing that?
I've been working for approximately 5 years in the environmental justice arena.
We'll get you to just stand still when we talk.
Okay. Let me sit down, because I move.
Okay. Okay. Good. So, how long have you been involved with the organization that you?
Approximately 5 years.
5 years.
Yes.
Okay. And what has been your impression of this particular training? This weekend, Southern?
Well, I always enjoy the Southern Echo trainings because basically they're real and they really get down to the key issue of changing the power basis and the foundations that exist. And that's what I'm all about. And I'm about truth telling and overcoming fear and understanding the future and all that good stuff. And I can relate to Southern Echo. I can relate to their beliefs because it's my beliefs too.
Excuse me, can you get y'all to come over down front? So I can pick up the sound. So, what stands out? What impressed you the most about this particular workshop? And when you qualify that, state the name of the workshop in terms of redistricting and move from there.
Well, I wasn't really familiar with redistricting, and I didn't exactly know. I heard about what Southern Echo had accomplished in Mississippi, but I didn't exactly know the mechanisms that took place, so it could happen. And what I learned is that it just wasn't a political base that made the change. It was the community throughout Mississippi that made the change with the redistricting. And I think that was a very positive and very powerful piece in this particular training and workshop. And it also gave me the confidence that here in South Carolina, where it doesn't seem like we can crack the system because it's so hard and there's so few people that are knowledgeable and willing to stand up for their own rights. But it gives me a comfort to know that it can happen. It's possible. We can bring about change. We can redistrict our own districts the way that we would like to see them, or how it needs to be, so we can gain control. Not just control, but so we can have power, which didn't exist before, which don't exist really. I'm quite honest with you.
How do you see yourself going back into your community and implementing the concepts together?
Well, one thing that I do, I work with young people, and I can take the message back to the young people that I work with, and it would give them better insight. Well, it gave me insight that I need to teach them more about the political science here on how politics work, because it's something that I really don't know too much about myself. But now I'm gonna go back and check out different things, and I'm gonna take it back to my young people to tell them that when you're in school and they're teaching, even though it's only 2 pages, they say, and they're teaching that particular piece on the Constitution, that they do have rights, and that they have the power to change things. And I think it's so important what the young man said, Mr. Hollis, am I correct? That we have to leave a legacy for our children, for our young people, so that they can be involved in the process of redistricting. It's so important, because if they don't have that, we don't pass the torch to them, or allow them to be a part of the process, then we hadn't really accomplished anything, because then we have to start over again. So I think that when I go back to my community, I'm gonna go back with the information that was given to me and tell the story about Mississippi, and let them know that we can basically do the same thing here in South Carolina. That's it.
Anything Karen Anthony on that asking?
No, not really.
Okay, did I did get your name, right?
Yeah, my name is.
Spell your last name. Say it again.
My name is Olida Myers, and the first name is Oleda. Myers, Myers. Thank you.
Thank you. Your name, state your name, spell your last name.
Timothy Brown, B-R-O-W-N.
And what organization are you?
I'm with Cafe. I'm a member of South Carolina United Action also.
Okay. So what does your organization do?
Well, Cafe is the Carolina Alliance for Fair Employment, and they fight issues with dealing with job issues where you've been treated unfairly, and you feel like someone has wronged you or fired you wrong or whatever like that. But we don't just stop with job issues. We also fight community issues also, which like education and health and all that is directly related to the jobs anyway. The more you educate, the better the job you get in the first place. And so we start with the kids also. So we protest at schools, businesses, and everything. Anything, if you're wrong and we feel like you've been done wrong, we'll see about it. As long as you remember you come to us about it, we'll do something about it.
How helpful has this particular workshop around redistricting benefited you today?
It benefited me a lot, because actually this is the first I ever even heard about the congressional districts and stuff, really, and how they've been drew and written in the first place, and especially with the Mexican population come around now, and I feel like in Saluda where I live, it's a broader minority population anyway than it has been probably since the last census, and I feel like the last census wasn't representing the minority good enough. Exactly. And I feel they hid some stuff anyway with the census that they did last time anyway, and with this redistricting thing that I heard today, which is dealing with the census that's coming up in 2000 anyway. I feel like it's very helpful getting a head start on what's going on in the first place, and try to get the community aware of what's going on. So when we do the new census, that we can have a minority population represented better, and redistrict this thing where we have more minority representation, which I think we really need. Because really with the minority representation that we get now, you can hold a lot of people accountable, like he's saying already. And like, I don't think it's many black judges at all, really, in South Carolina, as it is. And I know we have room for more. And like he was talking about the solicitors and stuff. The solicitors we have now, they just one track mind. You know, they with their little group, they with their little posse. If they get your name in up in the courtroom or whatever, even your family name. I know guys like Don Saluda had a guy last court term that had where solicitor was just cutting him off, chopping him off because of what his brother did years ago. And they called him up. They called him and his brother both, matter of fact, to the stand. And they kept delaying the trial, delaying the sentence or whatever. And actually locked them up one night because the lawyer wasn't in the courtroom with them. And they really weren't supposed to be in the courtroom that time. And you know, it's such a harassment thing, really. You know, it's with the solicitor we got now. He come from down here in Lexington, but when he comes to Salute, he just nasty as he want to be with certain people.
So, in terms of, and I'd like you to qualify this by saying maybe Southern Echo, right? Getting consensus. What stands out in this entire workshop that made an impact on you from their presentation today?
With Southern, well, I say with the presentation that Southern Echo gave today, what stand out the most to me is how they went into the communities and started this thing from the bottom up. And just like the little problem we had in Saluda with the older guys, like when a lot of the problem we had came out today with the whole presentation. You know, with the problem with the older officials and their ways and stuff like that, and the backstabbing and the gatekeepers and all that. And see, they brought everything out, and it gave me a better understanding really of what's going on. You know, when at first I was just really pissed off, mad, you know, the way we got treated and everything. But now I understand what was going on from this presentation they had today. And I know exactly how to avoid it happening again. Actually, you know, and not get so riled up about it like last time. It came to a big mouthful, really. And I won't have to worry about that now, really, because I see exactly what's going on now and exactly why it happened like it did last time. You know, just from this presentation, actually.
Anything else that stands out?
The Southern Echo?
Yes.
To me, the mentality and the way they do workshops in the first place, you know, because it's so laid back and, you know, and with the knowledge that people have, like Leroy. Now he's all the people that they brought here with the presentation today, they are not boring speakers or nothing like that. They and they give you information that you need, and the way they present it is exciting. Actually, you know, it keep you on your heels and you can retain it better. So the whole way they do their workshops and everything stand out to me, and I appreciate it. This is the second one I've been to them, and I enjoy both of them, really.
Very good. Yeah. Anything else you can add that I'm not asking?
What is it real? Southern Echo is well organized, and I'm glad to be involved with a group like that. Actually, you know, no matter what we do, if they need me for anything, fine with me. I donate my time anytime for it. You come to Mississippi for help, really.
Good.
Okay.
Thank you, bro.
You welcome.
Just tell me your name and spell your last name.
My name is William R. Thompson, THUMPSON.
And what organization are you affiliated with?
South Carolina United Action, sir. Located in Orangeburg, South Carolina.
And what is it that your organization do?
My organization is united to strive to empower the people to be more knowledgeable of how to take care of more of their own personal problems, to be economically empowered, as well as to educate them to the laws and rights of South Carolina, so they will be able to be more in control of their communities, in being able to know what's going on and to be a part of what's going on in a positive sense, in electing officials, black officials, as well as our officials that understand our views and see the vision and is able to comprehend it in an understanding manner that they be a part of it, is our goals in the organization in which we are part of. All right.
And what has been your impression of your assessment of the workshop today?
My assessment of the workshop today is terrific. The workshop enlightened, It plainly gave a understanding definition of accountability. It also revealed to those of us that were here today that with this information, we can make a drastic change. But it also indicated to us that we need to digest it, truly come to understand it, that we can speak of it just like we give our name and address and telephone number. From that, be able to give this to any individual that we pass going to and fro. The concept of the meeting was to not try and have a large meeting, but to be able to meet those one or two and explain to them what it means to be a part of South Carolina and its change. The millennium, it also told us how to be prepared for that millennium in this workshop. And it gave us tools to use in bringing about that change. It showed to us that people is the main issue. True enough, it was about the black community. But when we get into the real heart of it, it is enlighten all of the people, mainly to change our educational curriculum. That it constitutes the laws, how those laws work, how they're made, what is the Constitution of South Carolina and how it was put together. In this, learning the history of South Carolina and of this country in which we are living, then they will know how democracy works. That we will move away from this that has transpired over the last 17 to 20 years, a dictatorial kind of government, to be able to know within themselves the people are the power in this country, not the elected officials. It reiterated the concept that they are servants to the people and not to let them forget that terminology. These are some of the powerful things in which was given unto us today, as well as to know we are not in this fight or this struggle alone, that it is within this nation, period, especially in this southern region of this country.
In terms of the facilitators today, speaking of Southern Echo, when you responded to this, just mentioned Southern Echo here.
Okay.
But is there any one particular thing that stands out in terms of their presentation?
Southern Echo presented an exquisite workshop. It demonstrated cooperation. It demonstrated what it means to know that one doesn't hold the whole concept of what's to be said. It showed how to interact in getting the whole message out by having 2 or 3 people being able to deliver it. It showed cohesiveness. It showed the sensitivity of when it's time for the others to speak, and those little gestures were so unnoticeable till it was just like they had rehearsed how they were going to do it in every aspect. When you really look at it, as God would be pleased, this was something He blessed to be for us. And they did a fine job in interacting, in delivering it, letting us know, get away from that concept of top echelon and going down. It was across the board presentation, showing that if you wanted to give it any continuity, they all was a part of the top and the bottom. There was no middle or no hierarchy within the organization. ECHO did an exquisite job, as I foresaid, because they showed how we are to do it as a collective body of people in whatever that we embark upon in trying to change things here in South Carolina.
And from the information that was given today around redistricting, and going back to your community, how do you see yourself, I guess, in starting the process of implementing what you gathered from this training this week?
In the information that I was given today, I will go back and start talking to individuals. I will start planting the seeds of the information that was given to me today. As I get documentation from that which was delivered today, I will start passing it out and make it notable to them. If you want to talk about this, let me know. Giving them a chance, as well as going back and asking them about this information And as it is digested and is understood, start meeting as 2 or 3 and start building that consciousness of what redistricting means and how it can affect them more so. And in doing this, with this information, I feel that it would empower my people to the degree that to bring Southern Echo or someone else from the state here to speak to a small group or larger group, the real home run will take place to the point that by the year 2000, 2001, from this day forward with that kind of presentation and presenting it, we should be ready. We should be ready not only as a black community, but as a united community to know that all have been denied information. In order to keep 1 or 2 in place, you have got to deny it from a large sector, meaning the white community in my area is ignorant to the facts as well. And this has been shown to me in that which I have embarked upon by the grace of God, trying to be an instrumental person to bring my people to the forefront as a whole. And with this information that was given today, have mercy, Lord. Look out for the future. We're coming. We're going to know, my people are going to know what it means to be free, because a vast majority of white America is enslaved. Yet they don't know that. But with the information and the delivering that information to them in a free spirit that God is pleased with, changes are going to take place with this information.
Anything that you can add that I haven't asked that might be of significance?
I just want to thank those that have come. In the name of Jesus, I want to thank those that came and presented information today and last evening, that they be blessed to continue to do the work that they're doing. And I pray that this does not sit on anyone's desk, and that it break down the power struggles and the little personal frictions that are happening within this state as well as other states in trying to organize and change for the better of all mankind.
Very good.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, let me get you to state your name and title, please. Spell your last name.
I'm Charles Taylor, Taylor, and I'm state coordinator with the Carolina Alliance for Fair Employment. And in this process, I'm working with the South Carolina Policy Organizing Project, and I'm the coordinating committee for that.
Your assessment of the conference this weekend?
Yeah, I thought it went excellent. I think the goal, or what we wanted to have happen at the conference here, was to kind of go deeper in terms of what was ECHO's model in terms of a community-based approach to policy change, and to kind of get a broad conceptual framework. The first event we did in April in South Carolina, in which ECHO did the training, we talked about the truth-telling and overcoming fear, and so that was useful in terms of setting up this process. Those kind of trainings are good, also kind of standalones, or that are beneficial to people within their own organizations. This, I think, was the next level, which was as a collaborative, how receiving information as a collaborative about, major collaborative process that took place in Mississippi. So it's kind of going to, I think, the next step, and that was kind of the goal. And I think people left that I've talked with, were inspired by it, and so we wanted to recapture and maintain the spirit of what was done in Mississippi and what we hope to do here, and the inspiration, and to keep that in the forefront, as we try to figure out what we're going to do here.
Any particular thing that stands out in your mind in regards to the Southern Echo model, basically, so to speak?
Oh, I think there's so many things. Like I've said repeatedly in a lot of different places, I just think it's a brilliant model. I think it just has a lot a lot of things. I think it's fresh, it's kind of outside the box. I don't know of any other approach like it, which is very nice. Obviously, as being dedicated to community organizing, I love having the community organizing being the front and center, the whole idea of approaching policy change through community organizing rather than through straight politics or litigation or the kind of traditional ways. So I think it's very new and fresh. The thinking, the quality of thinking that went into it is tremendous. I think it's a very deep, sharp, analytical, conceptual model with a lot of, not just a lot of thinking, but a lot of good thinking. I think it's clear, also the fact that a lot of it is talking about what has taken place, so it's not theoretical. I mean, there's kind of a theoretical framework, but it's not just an academic classroom exercise, but talking, being able to talk about what was tried and what worked adds a lot of credibility or weight to the information I think you're getting. Also, I think it's the core of it is sound and also, somewhat unusual. I think the attention paid to values and to having a process with integrity and the kind of constant self-evaluation and trying to create an atmosphere of self-criticism and adaptation. It all just feels very healthy and very right.
And how do you see your organization moving forward in terms of implementing or laying the groundwork for redistricting here in South Carolina?
Well, basically, with the South Carolina Policy Organizing Project, it was inspired directly by the ECHO experience in Mississippi. Since that time, I think the kind of quality of that approach and our interest in it and ECHO's willingness to come and talk to us about it even before, the Ford Foundation issued its Devolution Initiative request for proposals, that it was just kind of there. So we asked, what are we going to do here? It's basically very similar, I think, to what was tried in Mississippi, because that is our inspiration. South Carolina has the second highest African American population by state, second only to Mississippi. So I think on ECHO's end, it's an interesting opportunity to see, can this be replicated? What are the differences? Because it's are two entirely different states, kind of one in the southeast, coastal southeast, the other in the deep south. What are the similarities? What are the differences? So the plan is basically, again, kind of inspired by what ECHO did. We want to spend the first year talking to people in the community, finding out what grassroots organizations are out there, what their issues are, what are people already organizing around in local communities. Also, doing some look at who are the policy groups in the state and what are those records. Also, in the first year, we're looking at hiring a Spanish-speaking organizer and doing some systematic outreach into the statewide Latino community, which has been growing by leaps and bounds, in which nobody that we know or aware of has done any kind of systematic outreach there. And then in the second year, very similar to what happened in Mississippi through ECHO's efforts, targeting 15 to 25 counties and doing more intensive community education work about the public policy making process.
Anything you could add that maybe I'm not asking that
just that individually, that I'm aware of kind of the demands on ECHO's time and and the schedules of Leroy Johnson and Hollis Watkins and Mike Sayer, and Brenda Hyde and everybody, and so we're really honored, that the ECHO folks think enough about the work that our individual organizations have done here in South Carolina to think that there might be a chance for there wouldn't be a waste of time to do some joint work here, and so we're indebted, I think, and honored by ECHO's willingness to come and spend time here with all the demands on its time, and that makes us feel good and very hopeful about the future here.
Thank you. Amen. All right.
This well feels this good and bounces right back into place. Pantene Pro-V Flexible Hold Hairspray, the only one with a last test. The best hold, the best deal.
C. Rich, lasting color times 53. A fresh idea, fresh face.
Hi,
And you want to tell them who you are?
I'm Tara. That's it.
That's it.
Yeah.
Well, tell me more. I mean,
I don't know what else to say.
you in what grade?
Nice.
9th grade. And what do you like about school?
Everything is fun.
Yeah? So what are some of your favorite subjects?
Art and clothing design. That's it. Art and clothing design.
Art and clothing design. Mhm. So how do you like North Carolina?
It's fun
Yeah? In terms of comparing it to New York?
yeah, it's better
Oh, really? What's better about it?
because when we lived in New York, I didn't get to go outside, and while now that we live in North Carolina, I can go outside with my friends, and I can do more stuff. It's more fun than New York.
Yeah? Good. All right. You are, tell everybody who you are.
Dolores.
Okay.
Tara's on.
All right. And so how are you related to Brenda?
Tara's on.
Okay.
Brenda and I are very good friends.
All right.
I call her my sister-in-law.
Oh, okay. Okay.
And I came down here because I love the South. I love the wide open spaces. And I like the southern hospitality.
Uh-huh. Do you have family roots here at all?
No.
In the South?
No.
No? So this is like an adventure, like just taking a chance out of the inner city
Yeah.
or something? Yeah?
Yeah.
So were you born in New York?